Happy holidays. It's the most festive time of year. It's a time for joy. And it's a time for giving. Join me and everyone's favorite clown, for some family fun in Terrifier 3. Welcome to my Christmas special, where today I'll be reviewing the wholesome, family-friendly movie of Terrifier 3. A few weeks ago for Halloween, I made a video talking about the first two movies, and now I'm finally ready to discuss the third one. I could have talked about it in the last video, but I wanted to really get into the spirit of things and dedicate a whole video to this new movie. So if you want any of my previous thoughts on the franchise, go check out that other video. Also, I actually watched this movie twice, so I hope I'll be able to really convey my thoughts on it. With that said, let's get started. Terrifier as a series has gotten increasingly better in my opinion. Terrifier 3 is the pinnacle for me because it weaves together everything the fans have come to know and love about these movies. You've got an interesting story, which this time isn't too overstuffed, and the characters really have a lot more going on with them, specifically Sienna. This movie does a fantastic job at giving the audience more reasons to care about and fear for the characters, especially in the third act because, wow, things get really dark. The setting of Christmas adds some more life and personality to the world, just like Halloween did for the previous films, and it makes the whole movie a little bit more fun. And speaking of fun, Art the Clown is once again a silly, goofy little guy who has even more brutal kills this time around. The blood, gore, and effects are running on all cylinders. I think it's ultimately subjective to say if this movie has the best kills, but it certainly has a lot more that can probably be considered among the best. And yes, there is one in particular that, like in Terrifier 2, I probably can't show a majority of. And we will get to that. But let's start with the opening of the film that is almost a separate little short story. The movie begins during the middle of the night with this cute little family who are in for a fright. Unluckily for them, they are in a town where a creature is stirring, and it's a jolly old clown. We get this unassuming intro that might come off as a normal, wholesome Christmas movie if you don't know what you're watching. But if you know that this is a Terrifier film, you're going to be on the edge of your seat due to the deafening silence around the house. Aside from the dialogue, there aren't many other sounds aside from faint footsteps on the rooftop and the howl of wind outside. That silence is quickly broken with loud swings and thuds of an axe. Yes, Art kills a child as his first victim of this movie. That should probably show you how much more this is ramping up the violence. Although this scene is done tastefully, I guess. You don't see a child being murdered, you just hear an axe cutting off his limbs. It's very artistic and thought-provoking, you know? This is real cinema right here. Oh, you wouldn't wanna... Oh, that's the disembodied corpse of little Timmy. Well, that's one way to thin out the audience of people who didn't know what kind of movie this was. There's not too much else to point out about this intro sequence other than the mother, played by Chris Fox, really sells this traumatic event. The power behind her screams adds so much genuine panic to this sequence, and it really feels like she just watched her husband and son die. Art is also in top form as always, striking a perfect balance of brutality and comedy as he points at the axe and silently laughs as he chops up his victims. At least he still has some manners. Before he heads out, he finds the last remaining member of this family, the little girl, whose fate is ultimately left unknown. And before we continue anymore, we gotta see what happened 5 years before this, because last time we saw Art, he was ahead. We see a cop searching the Terrifier attraction back at the carnival from the second movie, where Art's decapitated corpse remains. But just because it's headless doesn't mean it's not working. Art's headless body heads on over to the asylum where Victoria and her new spawn are. Things do not end too well for the folks over there, and Art escapes with his new companion. They return to Art's actual lair, which I initially thought was at the Terrifier, but apparently it's at this random abandoned house. Art is a little reluctant about his new friend, but Vicky happily makes some new companions of her own. Art heads up to the attic and has a seat, while Vicky takes a nice long relaxing bath in her own blood. And they both take some time to relax. For 5 years. Yes, they actually just sit here for 5 years. Certainly a unique way to show what our psychotic killers do with their free time. Everyone needs a hobby, right? Jump ahead 5 years and we enter a rehab center, where Sienna has been trying to recover from her unbelievable trauma. And unfortunately for her, this trauma does not simply vanish when she walks out the door with her uncle. She does get a little reprieve when she visits her Aunt Jess and Uncle Greg's house, where she'll be spending the holidays with them and their daughter Gabby, who is Sienna's overly interested cousin. Sienna is relieved to see family members who are safe and not in mortal danger, but Gabby can't help herself when it comes to her fascination with Sienna and what happened to her. We head back to Art's house, which is still abandoned, so some nice demolition folks come to begin work on taking this place down. But little do they know that they are guests in the house. And this place seems like it has a long history to it, which is backed up by the lead worker who talks about rumors of a killer who kidnapped children and buried their bodies in the basement. He says he's just joking, but judging by who the owner seems to be, there could be some truth to those stories. Maybe this really does end here, or maybe we'll find out more in the next movie. Regardless, they are certainly about to have some bodies buried in this house, because the guys run into the tenants and awaken them from their little naps. The lead guy gets off pretty easy with a piece of glass to the throat. The guy upstairs has a much rougher time. And speaking of glass and a rough time, while Art tears this guy apart, literally, Vicky uses that piece of glass to pleasure herself. Something that I've heard fans refer to as glasturbating. Yeah, so the violence was bad at the start, but now we're getting into the more deranged shit that's awaiting us further in this movie. Back at the house, Sienna has a flashback to her dad, who we finally meet. We see that he was an artist, probably for comic books, and she's a little upset because he's never drawn a girl character who's powerful and not a damsel in distress. Sienna comes back to reality, however, when Gabby starts being a little snoop and searching through her cousin's diary, which is full of the traumatic events of the last movie. Sienna is happy to see her cousin, but the dredging up of the past isn't helping her mental state too much. Later, when they sit down to eat, Sienna's mind begins to unravel further because she sees Brooke sitting at the table. You know, the girl who got her chest caved in after having acid thrown in her face? Yeah. She's not supposed to be here. Sienna starts to panic and needs to take some of her medication to keep calm, and tries to talk to her brother to help her stay grounded. Jonathan is now in college and is rooming with a guy named Cole, who might seem like a stereotypical douche character, but he actually is an alright guy. His girlfriend Mia is more of the problem around here. Mia runs a true crime podcast and wants to talk to Jonathan about the little life-altering traumatic events that he had to deal with when he was like 13. She's a little pushy, and Jonathan is seemingly a lot quieter and more reserved now, and is simply trying to push that part of his life away. Back at the clown residence, Art gets right to work on some new tools after his nap. One in particular seems very cool.
Can you shut the fuck up?
We then head on over to a bar where Santa Claus himself is drinking some beers with Ron Howard's brother.
I'd fuck you.
And Art recognizes Saint Nick. Art is starstruck, and Santa is of course a generous man, so he invites Clowny for some drinks. Meanwhile, Sienna has a calm time with her Aunt Jess, and it's a nice moment of relaxation. But it also brings up the memories of her mom, which are probably seared into her head now. This scene really stood out a lot to me the second time because Lauren Lavera really put on such a great performance in this movie. You can feel the anguish inside Sienna, the fear and longing for a return to a life that's normal. A life that she likely will never have again. Over at the bar, things become a little less festive when Art spits a drink in Santa's face and pisses on his leg. That's not very nice, but neither is the way they treat Clowny after this. So naturally, Art has to pull out an old classic. Art's full-on dark side shows up again, and seeing him like this is not fun. It's really unsettling. Santa tries to reason with his friend Clowny by saying that they're in the same business. They both make people happy. But remember, Art only makes one person happy. To fully get into the festive spirit, Art takes Santa's outfit so he can be the one to deliver gifts now. And he gives his most creative one directly to Mr. Claus. Art freezes him with liquid nitrogen and does some let's say, sculpting. And before Art goes, he remembers what Santa said to him when they met. Every Santa has to have a beard or they aren't the real deal. So Art borrows his and heads off to spread some of his unique blend of joy. The next day, Sienna and Gabby head to the mall to do some Christmas shopping for the family. Everything's perfectly normal until the Clown Cafe music comes on over the loudspeaker, accompanied by screams of terror. It's almost like a summoning or something because Art Claus drops on by and runs into his mortal enemy, who is completely stunned in horror. After this, in an act of seeming desperation, Sienna meets up with Jonathan. She tries to get him to come back with her to the house, probably for protection, and unfortunately Mia shows up to pester Sienna, because she is apparently pretty socially inept. Sienna rightfully tears into her, and once again we see why Lauren is so goddamn good in this role. She conveys pain, sadness, anger, all in this short scene. The siblings leave and have a rocky interaction because Sienna is freaked out about seeing Art alive, and Jonathan is just trying to move on, which he specifically states. Sienna brings up a letter that he wrote to her while she was away. We get our much needed exposition on why Art is a supernatural being, and it's probably done the best way it can be here. Sienna reads the letter to Jonathan to remind him of what he said and to piece together the current situation. They believe that a demon has invaded their world and is using Art's natural brand of evil to stay in the physical world. It also needs a host, which they believe was the little pale girl and is now Victoria. Her initial interaction with Art and her following insanity turned her into a good host for the demon. The siblings also believe that there must be a being that can counteract the immense evil of Art and the demon, and that is Sienna. She mentioned that her dad was likely guided by some righteous being that helped him create the sword, which is able to harm the demonic entities. I personally think this is an interesting route to go down for this overarching storyline. There was already so much spiritual and religious symbolism in Terrifier 2, so it makes sense that demonic possession is the grand reason why Art is unstoppable and is specifically targeting Sienna and her loved ones. This demonic possession stuff will get expanded upon more later, so how about we head back to the mall where Art Claus delivers some presents to all the good boys and girls. As usual though, his good intentions are met with negativity and he's kicked out of the mall. However, he makes sure to leave with an explosive exit. Before reaching his final stop for the night and delivering his last presents, Mr. Claus stops by Jonathan's school and crashes the Christmas party. While sneaking around the dorm rooms, Art runs into Mia and Cole, where he overhears her mentioning how she wonders what it's like to be in the presence of a being as evil as Art the Clown. Well, in the spirit of the holiday, Art Claus plans to gift Mia with that exact experience. But before that, Sienna returns home with the sword that she went to pick up from the Terrifier. We then see her and the family trying to have a relaxing evening, but they're interrupted when they hear the news of the explosion at the mall. This triggers Sienna once again, and she begins to panic. This prompts her uncle to go and pick up Jonathan because Sienna thinks he may be in danger. And now, we've reached the main attraction, the equivalent of the hacksaw scene and bedroom scene for this third movie, the shower scene. Just like with the bedroom scene, this gets pretty detailed and fucked up. So just like in my last video, I'm gonna cover this in detail since I will be blurring 95% of this. Here we go. Mia and Cole are getting busy in the shower, and Art is preparing to get busy himself. Since Mia was so adamant about experiencing an Art the Clown event, Mr. Claus provides her with a Christmas miracle, and also a chainsaw. He uses the chainsaw to break the glass of the shower, cutting off Cole's fingers, leg, and Mia's entire chest, as well as most of her skull and jaw. In her earlier discussion about Art, Mia wondered what she'd see in Art's eyes. So he shows her directly that there truly is no soul behind those deep, dark pits of chaos. But again, he's in a giving mood, so he gifts her these cute little glasses. What a wonderful present. And then he just tears up the rest of her body. He also has one last special gift for Cole, who gets a chainsaw right down the chimney. If you were worried in the past two movies that Art may be a bit misogynistic because he does the most horrific things to women, well, hopefully with this kill you can see that he's a truly progressive individual. Art will happily cut a person in half starting from the genitals, no matter their gender. You gotta love our inclusive homicidal king. He cuts straight through Cole's limbs, his head, his jingle bells, and finishes this jolly delivery with a blood angel. Now, personally, I'm not quite sure if this beats out the bedroom scene for me. That scene is probably going to be stuck deep in my brain for many years. This one is certainly fucked, but it doesn't quite beat out the bedroom scene. I also think there's a scene in this movie that's even more vile overall, but we'll get to that soon. We get one more scene outside the dorm where Uncle Greg waits for Jonathan. He gets a call from him and hears a voice that sounds eerily similar to the one the little girl used to mimic Jonathan in the second movie. Then we head back to see Sienna, who is resting after her earlier panic, and she has one more dream of her dad. We see the nice moment where her dad shows her the drawing of her in the Valkyrie outfit. She probably didn't know at the time that that would be her, but it's inspiring to see her get so excited by this powerful character. This is a cute moment, until the dream turns into a strange vision, where Sienna sees a demonic blacksmith crafting something, and being held back by a holy statue, which, by the way, is apparently not CGI, but an actual person wearing makeup and prosthetics. That's absolutely insane to think that this actress moved in that strange way all on her own and it wasn't CG. But yeah, anyway, this scene seemingly mirrors Sienna's relation with Art and the demonic entity. She is the holy, righteous figure who has to keep the demon in check. Sienna then wakes up in the middle of the night to hear aunt and uncle arguing, or so she thought. Turns out the final stop for the night is their home, and Santa has arrived along with the birthday girl. We now enter the final act of the film, and things begin to take a much darker turn. The darkest this series has taken so far. Art and Vicky tie up Sienna and Aunt Jess in the living room as they decorate the house with the remains of Uncle Greg. They have a cage on the table in between them that has a skull inside, and they say that this is Gabby. They torture Jess mentally before moving on to the physical part, and as they prepare to kill her, we get a moment that is equally inspiring and heartbreaking. Jess tells Sienna that she loves her, right before saying to kill them both and make them suffer. That encapsulates the scene pretty well. It's badass, but it's haunting because you know things aren't going to turn out well in the end. Now we get the grossest scene for me, the one that makes me feel the most uncomfortable because of how unhinged it is. Most of the other kills are essentially just cutting up people in gruesome ways. This one adds much more depravity. They shove a tube down Jess's throat, causing her to vomit. The tube is then hammered into her throat and they stick rats down it. You see them crawling down deeper into her throat, and I'm just gonna stop there because this is definitely the most disgusting kill so far. And it just made so much worse too because Sienna is forced to watch this. For her other friends and relatives that were killed, she found them already dead. She never had to see it happen right in front of her eyes. The demon who is in possession of Vicky is now directly speaking to Sienna, who tells her that she's going to take everything away from her before finally possessing Sienna. To show that she really means everything, they bring out Gabby, who is still alive, and then reveal that the skull was not hers, but was in fact Jonathan's. And we will get to that later because I have a lot to say. The demon tries to possess Sienna but is unsuccessful because Sienna is still holding on in hopes of protecting Gabby, her last remaining family member. Right before Art finishes her, she says that she's sorry Sienna couldn't open her gift. Those cruel monsters are tricked into believing that it's just a gift, but little do they know that it's their downfall. Sienna takes out the sword, cuts Art's throat, and finally puts Vicky to rest, while simultaneously banishing the demon. The triumphant moment is short though because Art is still alive. He duels Sienna with his chainsaw, which is pretty awesome. They fight for a while and he shoves her head into the hanging corpse and tries to choke her with the intestines. But like the badass she is, she chews right through them, which is sick as fuck, in both senses of the word. And while this is all happening, Vicky's body is melting into some kind of acidic substance, and the house starts creaking. Sienna stabs Art and is prepared to finally finish him for good, but the house breaks away and a hole in the earth opens up. A massive crater leading to probably hell itself is in the middle of this living room. Gabby falls in and Sienna desperately tries to save her. The only thing she can think to use in that moment to pull Gabby up is the sword, which she holds in her hands with the blade facing her. Neither of the girls are able to hold on, and Gabby descends into hell. Art escapes and Sienna is left with a house full of dead relatives and more trauma. All she can do is vow to save Gabby and bring her home. The film ends with an interesting direction and a fun little full circle kind of moment. Art waits at a bus stop, now seemingly disconnected from his demonic influences. He gets on the bus with a woman who is reading a book called The Ninth Circle. He creepily stares at her while covered head to toe in blood. While terrifying, it's clear that his fun spirit isn't gone for good, because he honks his horn one last time before heading down an unknown path. This is a cool scene because The Ninth Circle was Damien Leone's first short film, which also starred the very first incarnation of Art the Clown. And this situation with a creepy clown staring at a woman on a bus is what Damien mentioned was the very concept that led him to create Art in the first place. And with that, we've reached the end. Now, you can probably tell that there's definitely going to be a fourth movie, because this ending sets up so many possibilities and it's a pretty major cliffhanger. First off, we get proof that there is in fact a demon involved, and it was defeated but probably not for good since it can possess different bodies. And this giant hole into hell should make you think that the next movie is probably going to involve Sienna straight up going to hell, which is really badass to me. The series is already too deep into the supernatural stuff, so why not just keep going all the way? And there can be plenty of unique ways to do this. One theory that I have comes from something Damien said. I don't remember specifically what interview it was in, but I remember hearing him say something about the Clown Cafe potentially being a real place. He hinted at it maybe not being just a nightmare, but an actual physical location. So maybe the Clown Cafe is hell, or it's like a part of it, a specific interpretation of it. There's a lot of possibilities, so I won't list them all, but I like to think that the cafe will be involved in some way. Also, something I thought about when watching this the second time was that Sienna is probably going to be on the run after this. All her family is dead or missing. She doesn't have a single person to testify for her now. If she called the cops to this house full of blood, corpses, and a tunnel to hell while she's the only person present, her ass is 100% getting a life sentence or just straight up executed. So she's probably gonna be some kind of fugitive. Also, when or if Sienna reunites with Gabby, they're probably gonna have a much stronger bond. They both have lost their entire families now, so they will only have each other to lean on. And Gabby could also be possessed by the demon or some other entity to really make Sienna struggle more the next time around. And speaking of Sienna and her struggle, I want to talk about how goddamn incredible she is in this movie. The movie itself is obviously not the most profound thing ever made, but I really truly enjoy Sienna's character here. So much that I think she's probably my personal favorite character in all of horror. Granted, I still haven't seen too many horror films, but Sienna is just such a wonderfully crafted character. Her determination is fantastic, but the look into her psyche and her mental health is also great to see. In the second movie, when she's having the panic attack at school and does the "I'm fine" thing to her friends, I thought that was just a cliche, but I'm glad to see that this is probably actually part of her character. She seems to be a person who struggles with getting help and talking through her feelings and trauma, so I like that that's something that gets touched on a lot in this movie. She's so fucking cool, but her life and what's happened to her is just so depressing. I think that's why she works. She's a badass, but she's relatable because we see exactly what she has to go through, and see that despite all of the absolute worst shit happening to her, she's still going. As I've said, Lauren's emotion in this was incredible. She is a phenomenal actress. She needs to get more roles. I love Sienna, but I really hope Lauren isn't just relegated to horror, cause she could go so far in her career. As for the rest of the movie, I loved most of the other stuff. Art is great as always. He's really funny this time. The scene where he slaps Sienna's head repeatedly as he walks by is great because it breaks up some of the tension, but it's really hard not to laugh because this is like one of the darkest moments of any of the movies so far. Also, I like how they changed Vicky this time. Damien and Samantha Scafidi, the actress, said that Vicky was already going insane after the first movie, and so that's one of the reasons she got possessed. So this Vicky isn't really her, but kind of an amalgamation. I like how crude she was, and I think she has a lot more personality here than in the first movie. I do kind of wish she had a few more scenes, but I think Samantha did an excellent job, especially with the makeup she had to wear, which they said took close to 8 hours for her to get into every day. That's some impressive commitment. I also really liked the runtime. I feel like this was a more adequate way to tell the story. The second movie really did drag on a bit, and I feel like Terrifier 3 had a lot more meaningful and purposeful scenes. Nothing lingered too long. I guess that scene in the house could have maybe been cut down a tiny bit more, but to me the runtime of this felt just right. And while I liked all of that, I have to talk about the one thing in particular that I really don't like, and that is Jonathan. On my rewatch, I definitely noticed more that he just isn't in the movie for very long. He has his few scenes at school, but there isn't a whole lot going on with him. There's a much stronger focus on Sienna. And again, I love Sienna in this, but I feel like Jonathan should get a good amount of spotlight too, since he is one of the only survivors from the last movie where he was much more of a focus. And his death really sucks for me. Killing this important character off screen is really lame, and it's essentially used just to further Sienna's character, which is also pretty lame. I know that most of the kills are like that, but Jonathan was more of a fleshed out character than Aunt Jess or Uncle Greg, so I feel like he should get more than an off-screen killing. However, since he was so important and his death was off screen, you can probably assume that he isn't actually dead. Perhaps he was taken as a sort of precaution. In case Sienna didn't get possessed, they took him either to Art's house or straight to hell and are keeping him so that they can taunt or weaken Sienna even more next time. She might be going in with a mindset like she has nothing to lose, but realizing Jonathan is alive could make her more careful. And Damien has hinted at the idea of him being alive in a few of the interviews that I saw. Damien seems to be a guy who really knows and cares about the genre, so I'm sure he knows that if he actually killed Jonathan off screen, that would be really dumb. I'm sure he has a plan. I just personally wish he would have shown something to indicate that Jonathan is still around. Maybe just cut to Jonathan struggling and being scared in a dark place so you don't spoil where he is. Something small to hint in the film that he's alive. Because there isn't anything like that. I only think he's alive because of stuff I've heard outside the film. Regardless, I can't do anything about this, and while I was initially kind of upset about Jonathan on my first viewing, I really didn't think about it too much on the rewatch. I just love the rest of the movie so much. It's the perfect balance of fun and dark for me, and I think it's the best movie of the trilogy. I give Terrifier 3 an 8 out of 10. I've seen varying opinions on this one, just like Terrifier 2. Some people think that it's the same old schlock. Some people think it's a masterpiece and it's going to save the horror genre. And no matter what you think, it has become a very impressive film. Terrifier 3 became the highest grossing unrated movie of all time. This independent film featuring excessive gore and violence made almost $90 million worldwide, and Art the Clown is quickly becoming a horror legend. He's starting to become recognizable around the world, and he's come a long way from that weird little goofy guy in the first movie. So I don't know if this single movie is gonna push other directors and studios to take some more chances with their projects, but I think that showing that people have a real desire for more outlandish yet exciting stories like this will probably result in a few more unique projects. Once again, the best part of this franchise for me is the absolute passion that all these artists put into the movie. I am beyond excited for Terrifier 4, and I will absolutely be talking about it whenever it releases. I've had a wonderful time watching this fucked up little franchise, and I've really become attached to it. That's gonna do it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and feel free to subscribe for more videos. Happy holidays and have a happy new year.